Hi, I'm Dr. Richter, and I wanted to give you a little rundown on my Omega3 Health website. I'm sure you're well aware of the omega-3 crisis that we all encounter in our current state of nutrition. And my website is quite extensive, and obviously I have a solution to the problem. And what's most important is that you will learn how to get tested and how to understand research and to empower yourself to actually make better decisions based on science. So omega3health.us, and you basically have three options here. You can basically go to the Read More tab where all the science is. And there's a special tab just for athletes. So I'm going to have a YouTube rundown on athlete science nutrition omega-3 in special coming up. So read more. Basically, you can get your free ebook here that summarizes most of the most important research findings on omega-3, and you can chat with us by simply clicking on this tab here. And right off the bat here, what do we need omega-3 for? And it's clearly heart health, heart health, heart health. So your heart is a large percentage of omega-3. And the mitochondria in your heart, you've heard that mitochondria make energy, ATP, and that's what the muscle needs to actually function. And that is highly reliant on omega-3, and I will explain the research about that down the line. So I'm firmly convinced that because we are all testing 93% omega-3 deficient, you are basically in risk of heart disease later in life. And we can totally get the situation in a much better way under control. So heart health is my number one. Kidney health is actually my number two. But there's a whole list of things here: vision, eye health, immune function, inflammation. That's going to be a big part of the discussion here. And you can definitely relate most of all of our diseases to omega-3 deficiency. How do I get omega-3? Well, you have to be a grazing animal, and you can basically convert it from algae. And fish can do that too. But other than that, you're going to have to get a source of omega-3, which is eating grazing animals or fish, or we have a new source of vegan omega-3 directly made from algae. However, they're not quite as efficient as you will see. So in the old days, people used to go to the farmer and get their flaxseed oil freshly pressed, and that contains alpha-linolic acid, ALA, and that can be converted to DHA or EPA. And in the old days, that was a substitute. Nowadays, most all of the oils you find on the shelves, they're all rancid, unless you have access to fresh seeds. Also, when we get older, this conversion just doesn't happen anymore, and that's what our tests show. And that also has to do with aging, and I will explain all of that. So here's my table of contents, and you can click on each of the items: introduction, the general omega-3 history and why we are in this crisis, introduction to general fats and oils, what are they, what should you eat, what shouldn't you eat, what is the omega-6 to 3 inflammatory index, and here are all the scientific studies that I have listed. It's a subset, obviously, but the big ones are here, like aging, stem cells, arthritis, autoimmune disease. Your brain actually shrinks without omega-3. Cancer is a big one. The list is fairly long, and there's scientific studies along with everything here. So IQ and pregnancy, so you click on it and you will see that this is what it looks like. Brain health is essential in our children's IQ development at any age, right? So a direct link of the IQ and dementia are to omega-3. And if you click on the study, another window will pop up and it will show you the quantitative analysis of prenatal intake of omega-3 and how it affects your child's IQ. And there's a raise of 0.13 points. There's a direct effect. So you go back to the website and let's go back to the table of contents. So here we have the science of general foods and fats and more supplement science, you know, what is vitamin D, which is misspelled here, and your multivitamins and fiber and so on. Okay, let's just go through the whole thing. And I'll point out the most important things, and then you're off to the races and can read all these studies yourself as they interest you. So what's the big dilemma? Why are we in this omega-3 crisis? Because number one, grass-fed cows are not put on a feedlot, are put on a feedlot after they have been grass-fed. So that feedlot obviously is a source of omega-6 and not omega-3. So within a short time, they will basically exchange all of their omega-3 advantage and become inflammatory. So there's a new term that's been coined, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, and you have to have access to that. Or, as we know from our testing, which I will explain in another video, all of the tests that are good, which is very, very few. We have done over 1 million of them. Less than 3% have good tests. Those people have access to fresh fish every single day, or caviar dealers for that. Caviar is very rich in omega-3, the highest source of it. So traditionally pressed oils such as flaxseed oils, as I explained, turn rancid quickly, and the vegetable oils in general are highly inflammatory. Then there's the issue of saturated fat, which I will discuss. It's been bad-mouthed. Red meat, fatty red meats are our essential nutritional intake, and I will explain all of that. So a lot of supplements have been recently been tested, and they've been shown to be rancid. Here's a big study. You can definitely read up on the internet, and there's third-party testing labs that will show you that these pills are rancid. So we have a way of getting around that, and we have a way of basically stabilizing the oil, but you have to find one that's actually working, and you have to prove it with a good blood test. So again, the facts are that Western diets are deficient in omega-3 fats, and we have excessive amounts of omega-6, and that is, you know, been going on for a long time. So, you know, there's people out there who look at studies through the history. Watkins and Cornane have found out that we actually grew up on a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to 3. So our total fat intake obviously increased, but what's most important is that our intake of omega-6s is going up drastically, especially since the 1950s. And with that, obviously also trans fats. And at the same time, our omega-3 is going down. So they estimate that there is definitely a very close to 1-to-1 ratio. So humans grew up on grass-fed beef that has a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3 to 6. So we've known that for a long time, 1978, the first Eskimo studies and how their heart disease is so incredibly low, right? So when Eskimos moved to Denmark, their EPA levels and DHA levels basically go down and vice versa. And so there's a direct relationship here. And this is basically what happened in the 1950s when food science or artificial foods got introduced. Margarine is one of them, dehydrogenated fats. That's when the whole problem started. People were told not to eat red meat that's grass-fed, and they were told that, you know, saturated fat is bad for you and butter is bad for you. And so all of these things have led to a heart health crisis, and it's directly related to omega-3 and its inflammatory index. So yeah, you can read all of that and how much processed food we eat. We all understand that. Here's a little gist on the Mediterranean diet, why it works so well. And people ask, you know, what about olive oil? What about other oils? And there's definitely, you know, a very detailed analysis of all of those, and you can read through that. So olive oil, for example, does not contain very much omega-6 or omega-3. It's mostly omega-9, which is good because even in olive oil, the ratio of 6:3 is very high, 11:1. So it is somewhat inflammatory, but the absolute values of omega-6 are not very high, and that's basically why it is a very good oil to use for cooking. However, we know it turns rancid when you cook it, it burns, and that's a bad thing. So I'll get to the oils a little bit later here. Again, I was talking about flaxseed oil, and you can convert the alpha linoleic acid that's in the flaxseed if it's not rancid, but we do that at a very low rate of 5% or less. So studies have shown, you know, that if you put cows on a feedlot, you lose 72% of the omega-3 pretty rapidly, and you know, fattening up the cow is basically counterproductive. So what vegetable oils are safe for cooking? Well, basically none of them. They're all inflammatory and they're all fairly rancid by the time they arrive in your kitchen. So I recommend to use oils that are saturated, which are coca, and I use a lot of coconut, and I use butter. You can use olive oil and avocado oil as they're fairly low, but again, they're not a source of omega-3, and you have to be very careful with the oils turning rancid when you cook them. Their smoking is not good for our health. So stay away from grapeseed, soybean, and so on. They're very, very inflammatory. So sources of general omega-3 good index foods are obviously sardines, salmon, and then algae. You can definitely get vegan omega-3 sources, which I explain later. However, there's a lot of business that the sardines or, you know, the small cold water fish do for us, and a variety of omega-3s that we don't really fully study. We just always pay attention to DHA and EPA. But you can clearly see here, you know, sunflower oil is extremely inflammatory, 632 ratio. So I personally eat a lot of sardines. It is a good source of omega-3, and I will explain the amounts later on, what exactly, how many grams of omega-3 you need to eat. So coconut is a superfood, as I explained. It's mostly saturated, and it is definitely a good source of fat because it's the only plant that has up to 25% stearic acid. And all the research has shown that your heart needs stearic acid. So one more time, fatty red meats have been bad-mouthed. And we see in our tests that many people are stearic acid deficient. So plants mostly contain palmitic acid, which is not useful for your heart. So there is nothing wrong with saturated fat, and coconut is the only plant that has stearic acid in large amounts. Butter is a very good source, not because it's devoid of the inflammatory omega-6s, but also because it has short-chain fatty acids, which have been shown to be highly beneficial to your health. So yeah, again, the discussion goes on and you can read about it. Our test, which I will get to in another video, but let me basically show you how it works. You have a very easy result that you can read in the beginning. You get your test, and then after 6 to 12 months, I recommend waiting 12 months. You can easily understand the test, and it looks something like this. Basically, I go back to my website and I go over to the menu, and here's the omega-3 balance test. And the test basically can be achieved if you are doing it from an anonymous barcode that you will receive. And we've tested, like I said, over 1 million people. 90%, 97% have a very unhealthy inflammatory index. And so that's how it looks like. This is actually a good one. Our kids are testing at 35 or higher, 50 to 1. Athletes test extremely bad. So this index is really what counts and what is related to all of the research, and how, all disease basically disappears once we get that disease under 4 to 1. And so after a second test, you are hopefully going to be balanced in the green. This person decided to do a fasting, and after fasting for a few weeks, he turned semi-balanced again. His index went up. So you do need a constant supply of omega-3. And the details are in these 11 fatty acids. Like I said, saturated fat is very important, stearic acid. And this is a typical test where you can see people's deficiency goes up to even 95% here, whereas omega-6 is in excess, especially arachidonic acid. So, you can easily keep track of your test, and you get this nice traffic light screenshot, red, yellow, and green. And everything is explained to you in detail in a PDF file. Your arachidonic acid range is crucial, which I also explain on my science page. Yeah, so we'll get to more detail of that later. But here's, an easy, nice picture. Again, way too much omega-6 in your diet, not enough omega-3. And that leads to, a large imbalance in an inflammatory state in your body. So how does that work? Well, here's your diet, very simple. You intake food, and let's say at any given time you cook with vegetable oil or you eat processed food, right? You're going to get 15 grams of omega-6 linoleic acid and only 1 gram of alpha linoleic acid. Coincidentally, they have the same name, just with alpha in front of it. That's just because of the chemical bond. They should have really named them differently, but it is what it is. So at this point, linoleic acid is inflammatory and alpha linoleic acid is anti-inflammatory. Linoleic acid is pro-inflammatory. I'm sorry. Okay, so now you end up with a large amount, see the big arrow, large amount of arachidonic acid, versus very little EPA and DPA and DHA. Those are your main omega-3s with an index ratio of 15:1. So it's very simple, right? We analyze red blood cells. Their membrane absorbs your intake of omegas over a certain period, and then you are basically in a state of constant inflammation because your membranes contain 15 times more inflammatory omega-6 versus omega-3. So very simple, and that's how this balance arises. So fourth topic here, all the clinical studies, and obviously there's no way I can go through them here in this relatively short talk. There's just one thing I want to explain to you that's very important, is that when you read a study on your own, you basically need to figure out, what is actually done in the study. Are they looking at the index? So if you feed, let's say, a pregnant woman rancid omega-3 supply, which is done a lot in the studies, for example, just cod liver oil, you are not only going to have a non-effect or even a nocebo effect, because that rancid oil is harmful to your health, but the study is not going to tell you anything. However, if you look at the 6:3 ratio, the index, it's a 100% correlation to disease or to study outcome. You cannot lie, because this ratio is basically what determines your state in your body. So let's say, you feed rancid omega-3, which doesn't work, right? It's not going to change the index. The index is still going to stay inflammatory. Okay, so if you look at a study, always look at the index and not just at the absolute amount of omega-3. And that cannot lie. So here's the biggest one. Your brain shrinks. Volume of normal hippocampus tissue related to the presence of omega-3. So the lower it is, it actually shrinks significantly. There's a value here, 3.2% greater. So the study is here. You can just click on it and basically get all your information directly. And you can definitely get more information than what I actually present here. Next topic is aging and stem cells. Aging is a huge topic. So aging is related to the overall state of health. There's no doubt that people who are healthier have a much better outlook on longevity and less stressed, less overall time spent on your efforts to get healthy with drugs and surgery and you name it. And the skin is a very good indicator of health. That is definitely on the outside of your body, and you can kind of have a very good outlook on your longevity when you look at people, and you can see their skin if it's gray, dull, wrinkled, dark. That's not good health. That's kidney disease. That's basically aging spots come with late age, and we know that for a long time. Yeah, and eczema and all of those skin diseases are directly related to your omega-3 input. Again, your brain capacity is what counts. So here's a little summary on omega-3 is essential for what? Okay, number one, inflammation. It's an antioxidant. It gives you mental strength, as I just discussed, because of your brain capacity. Memory, IQ, all of those things can be shown in the studies directly related to the index. So DHA keeps the membrane fluid, right? And you will see that no membrane protein, no cell division can happen without the presence of DHA. Arachidonic acid balance, right? So as omega-3 goes up, the inflammatory arachidonic acid goes down. So that's how that works. It's a very simple one-to-one mathematics here. And you want to keep that inflammation down, but you don't want to completely abolish it either. So yeah, you can definitely spend hours and hours on all of this here, but let me just show you a few studies here on heart health. So again, the Eskimos have a very low heart attack rate, and the US has a very high omega-6 to 3 ratio, right? That's what's plotted here, omega-6 to 3. And you can see that developed countries have a high heart attack rate directly relates to this because of all the tribes in between. And there's a linear relationship here. And that's been known since the 70s, 80s, after we realized that processed food is not the best option. Yeah, so blood pressure, it's all related to that. Cancer, the outcomes of cancer can be reduced by reducing the index ratio. Cancer is directly related to inflammation. All these studies can be clicked on, and I'm not going to do that right now, but you can read them all in detail. There's programmed cell death, right? So as your stem cells age, you will basically age, and all of that is related to omega-3. And to keep your stem cells healthy in a niche, you basically have a much better outlook at cancer and how to control the cancer. And cancer stem cells are very clever, right? They themselves, don't want to die. So they shut themselves off from the body, and they basically make a membrane on the surface that is highly saturated and does not contain very much omega-3. So the studies or the ideas show and that the surface pH and all of those studies show directly related to the lack of omega-3. Yeah, arthritis is inflammatory. There's no doubt if you suppress the ratio below 3 to 1, rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, which is basically a result. So the bones or the joints inside are basically getting eaten up by inflammation. So leaky gut, it all starts in the gut and the digestion, right? And leaky gut spreads to the joints. We call that leaky joint. So omega-3 actually fixes your digestion, and then it fixes your inflammation, and then it fixes your arthritis. So that's kind of the process, right? And there's studies here that directly look at the details of that. Lung health, asthma, COPD obviously is a different issue because you have a scar tissue built up from smoking or other toxins, and scar tissue is something structural that cannot easily be fixed other than with stem cells. But in the end, you still need the omega-3 to heal the tissue and to replace it. And the lung, as well as the liver and the heart for that matter, can exchange and can renew, but not without omega-3. So the whole topic of obesity, diabetes, it's giant. And I will talk a little bit about diabetes and cholesterol and all of that lower on. So you can definitely, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to understand that if your brain shrinks, if you basically have bad nerves, nervous systems, the stem cells in your brain literally can't function. And that all is related to mental diseases and dementia. So study after study showing a diet rich in omega-3 defeats the outcome of dementia, okay? And again, always look at the index, and it will tell you that if your index is low, your chance of dementia is much lower. Again, if your index is low, if you eat meat, if you have intake of omega-3, your IQ will be higher. Yeah, so age-related reduction of polyunsaturated fatty acids, so sometimes we call them PUFA, is inversely correlated with the expression of the enzymes that convert your alpha-linoleic acids. That's what this little article is saying. I was talking about IQ already. Vision, so your eye, it sucks out every last DHA molecule present, and that's because we're visual people. Our eyes are what number one focus in your body is to get that DHA, because you cannot function without proper vision, and the body sucks it out everywhere, sucks it out from your heart, from your liver, from your brain, just to keep that optic nerve going and the retina functional. That's what the studies are showing. And it's definitely possible to reverse eye disease, and studies on glaucoma and macular degeneration are very clearly related to omega-3. Hearing loss is a big topic too, and the hearing organ does improve with proper omega-3. And here's a big discussion about homocysteine, which is, one of the more modern inflammatory markers. So you can read about that. Thyroid disease is again also related to your general inflammatory state, and your general state of metabolism and diabetes. I was talking about skin already. Acne is a very good example. You can definitely read up. There's 38 studies here, for example, showing how omega-3 improves the outcome of acne results. Yeah, so addiction, alcohol, depression, those are all related to your mental state, your brain capacity, your overall hormonal balance. Especially young people improve tremendously with the intake of proper omega-3. And diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity directly related to omega-3. As you intake omega-3, your so-called bad cholesterol goes down. And the overall state of your blood, right? Your red blood cells, the state of your arteries, the wall lining, the glycocalyx of your blood lining, all of that contributes to insulin resistance and the presence of triglycerides, which arrive in your liver. So there's a big discussion on here how actually diabetes is a liver disease, and how that's all related to actually fat and not the pancreas or sugar. And you can read about that. So EPA and DHA reduce triglyceride production by up to 57% compared to oleic acid, that's olive oil, omega-9. So it's a pretty large effect that you can see here. And it's been known for a long time how omega-3 has an influence on your overall state of blood sugar. But again, this has to do with the liver and not the pancreas. So yeah, kidneys cannot be repaired, right? Once they're damaged, it's very difficult to fix them, and you need to go on dialysis. So you better keep them healthy. And dogs, number 2 reason for dogs perishing is kidney disease. And how's that? I mean, in humans, it takes decades, right, to develop kidney disease, but in dogs, it's now the number 2 reason. And their diet is so devoid of omega-3, and that little bit of omega-3 they add to the dog food, it's so rancid. So they're screaming for omega-3. So once your kidneys are damaged, right, it's pretty much the end, and you're not going to put a dog on dialysis. Yeah, so I give my dog a quarter spoon, depending on the weight, of Zinsino balance oil. Here we have autoimmunity, right? Big, huge discussion. And again, it's all related to inflammation and how that all works. You can read about in these studies. You definitely see that fish eaters, right, have a much better outcome. So a lot of these studies, they just talk about fish eaters instead of looking at supplementation or looking at the omega-3 index. And so, fish eaters typically have access to fresh fish, and it typically contains a much larger amount of omega-3. So those are good studies that basically can show you how they will reduce inflammation and have an effect on the outcome of diseases such as autoimmunity, diabetes, arthritis. Stroke is another one. So here's a really amazing one. You can prepare discs with omega-3. So this study clearly shows how the center of the disc in this rat experiment regenerates with omega-3, or vice versa, how it cannot regenerate without omega-3, right? So these are hardcore peer-reviewed studies with very significant outcomes, okay? And whether they're done in humans or in rats, the results are real. So again, no cell can divide. So your stem cells in your disc, right? They want to repair that disc and they can't do it because you're 95% omega-3 deficient. So fertility is a big one, and I'm gonna have a whole YouTube talk on how deficient babies are and how they suck out the last DHA molecule from their mother in order to develop their brain, and the outcome of basically the pregnancy itself, miscarriages, and so on. And here's a test. Sneak preview. So the baby basically is red, red, red. The mother was previously green balanced, now in her 3rd trimester, highly omega-3 deficient, and the baby really, really wants to get that DHA, and you'll see the actual values in detail. But we like to put pregnant women on a double or triple dosage of our balance oil so they can properly supply themselves during the pregnancy and the baby to develop their brain and nervous system, and heart for that matter. Yeah, so some health claims can be made. The European Commission's regulation that is all published, and the claims are very straightforward. Like I all explained to you, there's a 100% correlation between DHA and EPA and blood pressure, for example. So general immune system functions, undoubtedly, there's a relationship. And this also has to do with vitamin D and vitamin D absorption, right? You can't absorb vitamin D without a proper digestion, which doesn't work without omega-3 and magnesium for that matter. And the omega-3 is definitely anti-inflammatory. So the outcome of a very, very, critical state, for example, a critical COVID state, right? is highly dependent on the amount of omega-3 you have, because your immune system is designed to fight and fight and fight. It literally will kill you if you can't downregulate it, which is the case like in Ebola. That's how strong it is. It is designed to fight, fight, fight. So the body has stop mechanisms to suppress the immune system so you can finally get over this fighting process and move on with your life. However, that doesn't happen without omega-3. So it's a very integrated process, but you can see the inflammatory markers, which are TNF-alpha, IL-6, right? They are definitely downregulated to when you have omega-3 present. So when I have a virus, I actually take my Chinese herbs directly with the balance oil so it can coat my throat. That's where the virus is stuck, right in the mucosa. And it has a huge effect on viral replication. Yeah, so to go back to the index, so here's the cell membrane, and the cell membrane now is full of inflammatory omega-6. According to your test, we can prove it to you, right? So if you're going to release the fatty acids directly from the membrane into the cell, you're going to have inflammation, okay? We grew up on a 1-to-1 ratio. This is supposed to be a balanced approach when these fatty acids come out of the membrane, and now it's all inflammatory. Good, so that was the rundown on all of the science. Here's a section on saturated fats, which I mentioned earlier. Saturated fats are good for you. Fatty red meats are a key to health, and there's a whole discussion on vegetarianism and how healthy that is. Why do we need to cook meat? Obviously, we don't have the fangs of a tiger to eat raw meat. We figured out how to make food available for hundreds of thousands of years and make it way more nutritious easily. And so that's what our teeth are designed for, to eat cooked foods and make nutrition highly available to us. But it's a very big topic. Should we eat meat or shouldn't we? And there's a lot of controversies around it, and you will see the discussion later on. So is cholesterol dangerous? In my opinion, it's not. Obviously, very high cholesterol over 300 tells you that there's something seriously wrong with your metabolism. But all of the studies show that the effect of cholesterol is really not related to heart attacks and strokes, and the prescription of statins, which lowers your cholesterol, does not really lower heart attack or stroke at all. And all of those things kind of prove to you that we need cholesterol. So now we need cholesterol even more because we are so devoid in omega-3 to keep our membranes fluid. So yeah, there's a whole discussion here around statins in the so-called Jupiter study. And here you can see actually the outcome of low cholesterol. Your morbidity goes up to 2.5 times or even more when your cholesterol goes down to below 140. And obviously the study isn't normalized to omega-3, but it's a very, very important molecule. We need it. Our liver makes it. It's a bad idea to not eat high cholesterol foods, and it's a bad idea to inhibit this synthesis of cholesterol in your liver. So side effects of statins. Here's again a rundown on omega-3 foods and omega-6 foods. Arachidonic acid, the inflammatory omega-6, and what its range means. We'll have a special talk on that, but you want to be in a certain range, not too high, not too low. What about all the other supplements? Krill oil, sure, they can work, but all of the previous studies, like I showed you, they're pretty much rancid. And 1/3 of the omega-3 in krill oil is actually free. It's not bound to lipids, so it's even more prone to rancidity and oxidation. So which types of meat contain omega-3? Obviously, we discussed that it has to be a grazing animal, ideally grass-fed, grass-finished beef and cold water fish. Pork can contain omega-3, but it depends on what they eat, right? So here's again the ratios of different meats in terms of inflammatory ratio. And we know that wild salmon has a very good ratio. And grass-fed, grass beef is, a very low ratio, but it could be lower. Lamb is a very good one. So here we have another paragraph on what foods other than meat contain omega-3. And like I said, in the old days, people used to go to the farmer and get flaxseed freshly pressed. Walnuts are good, edamame, and some other weird seeds like chia seeds and so on. Even soy can contain omega-3, but it's just, not a good source. It's a very high omega-6 ratio. So all of these foods, they still contain omega-6, okay? They're not a pure source of omega-3. So here's a whole discussion on why we need to eat meat, and you need to read that in detail, and what it actually means for your body type. And I think anybody agrees that by now, there's no doubt we need to eat meat. At this point, we're not there yet to have a fully vegan diet. It's not healthy. And you can see all of the studies, vegans have a 2.5 times higher risk of hip fractures. Their bones are just not healthy. Bones and tendons, they fall apart. Your IQ, as I explained, your general digestion is not good. Does that mean we can't take a break? Does that mean, vegans don't do a good effort to really save the planet? All of those things are valid. Can you take a vegan break in vegan January or something like that? Of course you can. And it's always good to do something different, right? So all of that is discussed here. And the main issue here, telomeres, like they tell you, your longevity, it's a major marker. They're just not changing much with vegan diet. And the best diet, again, is the Mediterranean diet, balanced meat diet. And in conclusion, to the vegan discussion, I really want to say that we all need to make an effort to get rid of the greenhouse gases, which are only 11% in terms of cows. But the problem lies in mass production and 5 commercial entities, right? Corporations that own over 90% of the food, and it's not lying in sustainable grass-fed farming and waste of food, right? All of those things matter. So here's number 6, the general signs, supplements. What are lipids? How many different lipids are there? What should your index be again? What do we have to say about multivitamins? And there's a whole other section that you can see in my menu here, more supplement signs that are not directly related to omega-3. But for example, should you take glucosamine? Should you take calcium? Those are discussed over here. We have a very special multivitamin, and that's explained here. And the effects of curcumin, the effects of fiber, and all the other ingredients, beta-glucan. And we have a very special vitamin D supplement with 4 types of magnesium that is very inexpensive. and it will go together with the omega-3 balance oil. And that's, the minimum package is the Xenoshine with the balance oil. The importance of vitamin D cannot be underestimated, and that's all discussed and explained here. People turn very critical when they have low vitamin D in their blood in terms of outcomes of virus infections and other disease, bone health, and so on and so on. Yeah, and last but not least, here we have obviously analyzed our own products and their oxidation, so-called total oxidation values, third party, and since Xeno is not oxidized, and we know that from our balance test, because when you get your next test in 6 to 12 months or even later, it improves, and your omega-3 just keeps going up and up and up. It is not rancid, and we have a very good product. More on basic science here, what DHA actually does. Transmembrane protein function is a very important one. So again, the mitochondria cannot make any energy. They just can't without omega-3. So the amount of lipids in your cell far outnumber the amount of proteins or any other molecule, 20 million. And in my opinion, fat is the most important nutrient or scientifically discussed nutrient, period. So here's a picture of the cell that's basically packed with membranes, right? We always think about this shell on the outer cell. No, that's not the case. The cell is packed with lipids, and that's why there's so many of them, and they synthesize proteins and do all the functions. And life literally is a separation of inside of outside, controlling what goes in and out. And that's what your membranes do, but not just on the outside of the cell. It does it within the cell, in organelles, in the endoplasmic reticulum, and even controlling what goes in and out of the nucleus, and obviously the mitochondria, which are separate entities within our cell. All of that is omega-3 dependent. So last but not least, again, this is inflammatory arachidonic acid and anti-inflammatory EPA omega-3. The structure of it, you can see at the end of the molecule here, you have another double bond, otherwise they're the same, and that double bond gets oxidized. That's basically what turns rancid easily. So this molecule is very, very fragile, and we cannot synthesize this. Humans cannot make it. It has to be taken by fresh food, right? So here's the whole metabolism around that, those inflammatory omega-6 eicosanoids. And for the matter, the balance of omega-3s and 6s, and I will have a separate talk on that. So I hope this was helpful and how to navigate through my extensive website. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us, and we will get back to you and explain how the whole process works and how to really empower yourself with reading proper studies by yourself. With that, I'm going to end this talk. Thank you very much.